There is a secret world for those with the eyes to see it. The vast majority of humanity blindly swims in a potent, psychic melange that suffuses us like a roiling sea of emotion and memory. All humans naturally produce this field, though some are more sensitive to it than others. They may see auras, read emotions, or see supernatural phenomena, ghosts, apparitions, or echoes of things that are not there. However, for a select few, their connection to this shadow presence goes deeper. It darkens, coalesces, and twists into something tangible and powerful. These powers feed on the deep psyche, emotion, and mental state of humans, the sunless and subconscious torrent that flows beneath the surface of human thought. Occasionally, through the course of tragedy, trauma, stress, or extreme circumstances, this psychic field can go wild, ballooning like a cancerous growth. It manifests as malevolent presence, something that warps and controls reality around it, and begins to feed on the flesh and minds of others. Invisible to the psychically dull, these beings can either exist separately to a human, or possess them, warping them into a monster. Collectively, these beings are called sins. Their continued existence, once they are birthed, will continue to twist and degrade the people and even physical location of an area, creating a pocket dimension called a palace, and growing until they reach a catastrophic apotheosis known as the sin event. These typically result in a mass psychic veil rupture, an event that is instantly traumatic and fatal to humans in a broad area. You are a tool, a weapon of the highly secretive and super-governmental organization Cain, in an official capacity of an exorcist. You have grace, the ability to perceive sins and manifest powerful and highly honed psychic techniques called blasphemies. You have a single purpose in this world, to hunt down all sins and execute them with extreme prejudice. Cain is a game that focuses primarily on selling you the fantasy of searching and fighting some truly evil shit. Starting from the very beginning, Cain wears its influences on its sleeve. The game is about finding and hunting sins which are akin to the devils in Chainsaw Man. All the while, the players use abilities which are influenced from Jujutsu Kaisen. These influences obviously makes one think of hype anime fights and combat, yet if that's all this was, I don't think Cain would be nearly as interesting or as unique of an RPG as it is. Let's walk through Cain and see what it's all about. Right off the bat, one of the things I really love about Cain is how easy it is to explain to new players. There are a set of skills every character has, and each skill has a number of points. The number of points each skill has determines the number of six-sided dice you roll on any check. When you roll, you always take the highest rolled result. Typically, you succeed if your highest rolled result is a 4 or higher. If a roll is considered hard, you roll the check the same way, but only counting it as a success if your highest rolled result is a 6. Additionally, if the roll is risky, then the GM will roll a d6 of their own to determine if the risk goes your way or ends up getting you into a more complicated situation. Everything in the game works on this basic understanding of the mechanics. When you build your character, you allocate your skill points to determine which skills they're good at and which skills they struggle with. After that, the character is given an agenda and a blasphemy. This agenda is a narrative profile for your character, determining how they resolve problems. It also contains XP triggers, which are important for your character's progression. A character's blasphemy is a set of abilities which flavor their psychic powers. They usually cost a psyche burst, which is a limited resource each character has. You start every mission with 3, but you can get them back by resting. You can also forego the cost of a psyche burst by instead taking on sin, which gets you closer to becoming the very thing you're attempting to fight. In addition to the Psyche Burst, there is the Psyche Skill. The skill cannot be controlled by the players and is determined by the number of missions your exorcist has survived. This means that making a character, mechanically, can take as few as 5 minutes, while how those mechanics are actually expressed can be full of interesting variety. With that, a majority of the game's resolution system has been explained. But let's dive more into these character options. While it's easy to think of a blasphemy as this game's version of classes, it's better to think of them as simple themes for the type of abilities each exorcist has. Each blasphemy has its own pros and cons, and it's not totally necessary to diversify your abilities or types of blasphemies in the group. Each of the 12 base blasphemies are meant to give different psychic fantasies to the characters. Tension allows the user to make a psychic field which is very durable. This can be used to slice things in half, protect people, or even change the environment by making something less solid. Ardence is about the control of potential energy. This provides them the ability to make explosions, freeze everything nearby, or even change the weather. Flux is about manipulating time. This allows them to reverse events, stop time, or accelerate healing. Vector allows you to provide velocity to objects. This allows you to shoot air bullets, or even send yourself flying. Gate allows the user to control space. This allows them extra pocket space and even teleport to a new location. Smother allows you to snuff out innate universal properties. This means removing friction or removing the properties of tools or even disable any piece of human advancement. Whisper gives you a shadow that follows you around. The shadow may allow you to see the future, and you can enter scenes which don't include you because you predicted the event. Edit allows you to change existing matter. This allows you to steal credentials, make copies, and even remove non-important objects from obscuring your vision. Bind gives you control of a sin, which usually isn't allowed, but as long as you're on Cain's side, they're alright with it. Your sin can fight for you or do things that you're normally completely unable to do. Palace allows you to make a small micro-universe to take refuge in. This usually gives you the ability to help you relax and hide items or pieces of information. Jaunt gives the Exorcist control over the soul and body. This allows them to jump into other people's bodies and move their souls someplace else. Sympathy makes the Exorcist resonant with objects that humans touch and interact with. They can bond or amplify those objects to learn more about them or use them for non-traditional purposes. As you can see, some of the blasphemies seem far more useful in combat, while others seem useful for investigation, which leads to the other part of Cain, its split focus. This is an interesting dichotomy given that Tom's other games tend to have a heavy focus on just combat, and while Cain has a really fun combat system that works for what it's trying to do, the game is ultimately about finding information on the sin's host so the player has the best chance possible at defeating the sin. You see, each of the 6 available sins has 3 questions that, should the players know the answers to them, can be used to mitigate the damage a sin does, while also doing damage to it. To get the answers to those questions and find the nest where the sin lives, the players are required to interact with NPCs and investigate police records. The game is largely about this investigative part, despite some of the anime trappings. Sure, in combat you blow up sin traces and keep yourself alive, but most of the game is simply talking to people, trying to understand the situation you find yourselves in. Cain really is about investigating what causes these people to change. All the while, you have to worry about changing yourself. Now, due to sins being manifestations of human trauma, the player characters are not exempt from becoming one. If you max out your sin total, you enter a state called sin overflow. If you do this while already having a sin mark, you have a chance to become a type of sin called an imago. The character is then controlled by the GM. This is a really neat dynamic where the players are always trying to manage their sin while making sure they don't get too injured. Dying is a failure state along with becoming a sin. This continues a trend I've noticed with Tom Bloom's work, where characters often have 2 health tracks. But that's just my own observation. The point is, the players are attempting to manage their sin, psyche bursts, and health while taking down the monster that's infected the town. Once you track it down and fight it on its home turf, you can then begin to execute it. Combat in Cain uses the same rules as everything else does, with some heightened stakes that require the players to think a bit more strategically. Doing anything mundane to a supernatural entity is always hard, again, meaning that you have to roll a 6 to actually succeed. And fighting something that's fighting back is always risky. This effectively means shooting a sin with the standard pistol is considered hard and risky. Typically, the risk die has simple, broad consequences the GM uses as inspiration to decide what happens to the character. In conflict scenes, there's a specific attack or parry that the enemy does. This happens at the same time as the player's roll, so it's actually lightning fast compared to other combat systems, and allows a lot of player control in how they want to handle a situation because of the broad application and understanding of their skills and psychic powers. Fighting sins are even deadlier, as they have special moves no other enemy has, and if you're fighting them outside of their nest, also known as their palace, they can retreat there. Combat in Cain being so fast and loose actually helps build the tone of a dangerous world. The characters can very easily and seriously get hurt. This means the group will sometimes need to take a break to deal with the injuries and pains they take over the course of the mission. Resting in Cain is a really easy way to regain your abilities and heal your wounds. It's purely beneficial, but unlike some of the other games I've talked about on this channel, resting in Cain has mechanical consequences for the hunt. You see, after most scenes, you'll gain this thing called tension. And once enough tension has accumulated, there'll be an increase in pressure, which makes the sin you're hunting stronger. Eventually, you will max out on pressure, and the hunt ends with the sin growing too powerful and killing everyone in a city block or larger. Resting completely bypasses tension and instead just increases pressure in the game, bringing the characters closer to destruction and giving the sin additional strength immediately. This system incentivizes players not to slow down and focus on defeating the sin as quickly as possible. That said, rests are pretty great if you decide to take one. You regain some power, heal up a bit, and can even get rid of afflictions. This makes the mechanic a real choice for the players with clear and focused consequences. Resting itself becomes a decision, and the opportunity cost is mechanical already, meaning the GM doesn't have to put in arbitrary house rules to figure out why the player shouldn't just sleep right before every single dungeon run. It's an elegant bit of game design which you see everywhere in the game. On top of all of that, the game is just really good at providing the players the experience of fighting evil monsters as cool exorcists. You can shoot air bullets, slice reality in two, throw cars, imbue your sword with psychic energy, remove the kinetic energy from the molecules in a car's engine to freeze it whole, and more. Each of the blasphemies feel like cool tools in a toolbox to make the players feel as in control as possible. Players are also encouraged to use their abilities in non-traditional ways to solve problems. These are what makes Cain a really fun game to run. Your players are somewhat restricted in the theme of their powers from their blasphemies, but you get to see them problem solve with them in very interesting ways. It makes the game feel almost like an arc of JoJo's, where the interesting part is seeing how the characters use their unique abilities to get out of outrageously difficult situations. That said, those powers are on a limited resource, and you have to consider when and how to use them to get the most out of them. Otherwise, you may gain sin. As you use powers without psyche bursts, your characters will gain sin until they overflow with it, gaining a sin mark on a particular body part. If they continue to overflow their sin, they will become an imago, losing themselves to the power, forcing the player to make a new character. This makes Cain's message pretty simple. The use of power must be tempered. We can become monsters if we don't take measures to limit that power. As you go through Cain, the more power you get, the more you have to be careful to not let it consume you entirely. This makes the game an interesting dance as you learn to handle really tough situations using your limited resources. Your exorcist slowly learns how power can consume you completely, but with a deft hand, they can navigate that game of power. Right? After you get past the first impression of Cain being about cool anime fights, which make the player characters feel like the strongest people on the planet, you start to think about why so many sins exist in the first place. When you look over what causes a sin to exist, they seem to be born of specific situations, and those situations are almost always caused by the cruelty of other people. Sin types have these trauma questions, which read less like petty villainy and more like real questions about how this person was unwound by society. What are you most ashamed of? Why did you give up on your dream? What are you unwilling to sacrifice? What do you hate the most about humanity? While you were starving, who was feasting? What did you lose? These questions are reasons the sin manifested in this person. They're also the best tools for defeating the sin, since the player can use the answers to these questions to hurt the sins more effectively than with any weapon. This means even these psychic manifestations can't escape the pain that plagued their hosts. One of the things you do when you're preparing the game is making the sin host a character with a deep and interesting life, knowing you'll have to push them beyond their breaking point so they manifest a sin which threatens them and everything they care for. Suddenly, you're thinking about why these people have to be executed. You start questioning what is forcing you to do this to people, what is causing these people to become worse. You realize the problem isn't with sin, it's the world that's mistaken. You should be able to fix this world, right? You just need to fight the thing leashing you. You need to fight Cain. Cain is the supranational organization which handles all psychic events for the world. They force the player characters to become part of the organization to take out other psychics like them. Cain openly dehumanizes all psychic sorcerers. There's even a small blurb in the book stating that exorcists have not been given human rights since the 18th century. Even then, I doubt they were treated fine prior to that decision. This makes Cain and his three major departments, Seer, Temerity, and Castle, major players on the world stage as they fight the shadow war of exorcists and monsters, while everyone else worries about other things going on in their lives. Because of this, it's easy to see the story of the game itself as condemning unitary governing bodies, or even just the idea of large life-consuming operations like it. Cain isn't alone in its unique strengths of dividing and atomizing people. In fact, Cain is rather mundane in this respect, and people are more likely to run into issues with their local system than anything Cain may do to them. Yet, as exorcists, you have no other masters. The humans that could stop you are just too weak. If you were to grow in strength, you wouldn't have to worry about the control they exert on you anymore. Instead, you can focus on actually helping people instead of just killing them and forcing the supernatural world away from public consciousness. Changing that world, making it better for everyone, not just exorcists, might be what the people of the world need. Alas, this is all up to the GM. There are some indications of Cain's resources available, but whether a group of strong exorcists could genuinely take them down is up to the person running the game. There's part of me that believes that Cain is about that struggle between power and individuality, so getting rid of Cain would require something larger than just one small group of exorcists. That said, I can also see a situation where the players undermine all the major parts of Cain's control over the system of the world. It would require some concerted effort, but it would be possible, just costly. Cain is powerful, but powerful things fall all the time. It's just a matter of what you're willing to put into it. There we go. Instead of being about the internal struggle between men and beasts, Cain is really about finding a way to live with the pain and struggles that society often puts us through. Just like with the sin hosts, the player characters in Cain are shackled by the expectations others have for them, along with the expectations they have for themselves. Sure, the sins are evil, but why people manifest them in the first place is equally important. Cain isn't about the corruption of power in individuals, but the ways our society builds powerful entities which crush everyday people who are already struggling. Cain isn't about the sin in the hearts and minds of the psychics. It's about the sin in the hearts and minds of the people crushing them completely. Your job is to break free of that propaganda and fight for the right to be considered a person. Okay, are we right this time, or... At the end of a mission, the exorcists are given some options in how they deal with the sin. One of the options I've discussed is execution. They can no longer be a danger to you or anyone else. You get paid the most for this option. The stain has been cleared away. Yet, there is another option. You can decide to have the host regain control of their sin. This choice requires the player characters to make a judgment call. While it may seem obvious to kill the sin to get additional scrip, the currency in the system, you're implicitly saying something about yourself then, aren't you? The question is whether to keep your humanity and empathy in the face of incentives to do otherwise, or do you push back against Cain by deciding you want to keep your empathy and the ability to decide who you are? Can you condemn someone else to your fate? Are you merely a tool, or are you something more than what other people call you? These are the thematic questions at the heart of Cain. Giving players that choice is an important part of what makes the game interesting as a player. You can decide if your exorcist is just a tool of Cain, trying to enrich themselves to reach an early retirement, or you can decide that you're going to take care of people as much as possible, even if it means you aren't as efficient as you'd like to be. The game is really about that push and pull, whether we lose our humanity in pursuit of our own goals. Making that decision for your exorcist is more important than any other. Now, we come to the broader implications of this design. I'm sure you don't have to be a scholar to see some of the uncomfortable similarities to D&D. While I would argue that D&D and its kind of game intentionally builds in less moral ambiguity for the sake of keeping it light and fun, it's also a bit of escapism to believe that you can solve these problems with just some friends and a bit of power. Not to say that power fantasy is wrong in any respect, just that it's intentionally morally simple. It engages with a small set of easy-to-solve problems in the world. If there are purely evil monsters running amok, it's necessary to call on strong, larger-than-life heroes to solve the problem. Cain is significantly less simplistic. When people around you are hurting, and you're hurting too, do you help them? It's not always that simple either, but Cain made me think a lot more about the people I've hurt, and the ways I've caused pain in my life by trying to pursue my own goals. Not just physical harm, but not being there for my loved ones when I'm in my own head. What I'm willing to sacrifice for comfort is something I still actively wrestle with. And Cain asks me that question all the time. When I talk about RPGs on this channel, I tend to be mechanics focused, mostly because my favorite games are very focused on building engaging systems that want to do one thing particularly well. This focus is something worth analyzing, but I think I've done a disservice to the systems themselves. We can't simply look at the mechanics a system uses and not consider the whole picture of the system that it's attached to. It's a short-sighted way of thinking of the game as nothing more than components we can move and shift around any way we want. I could take the risk die from Cain, but it doesn't sell that game's themes. We can make homebrew rules to make Pathfinder a game that's more fun, but we're not going to fundamentally change anything that Pathfinder is trying to say by adding extra elements on top of it. This is why I believe that it's important to understand mechanics in their original context, and ultimately, why I advocate for people to play other games, even in spite of how difficult it can be at times. There are a lot of designers trying to say something about the stories we tell and how our agency changes those stories. It's important to engage with those designers completely and not just transplant one aspect of those systems to be put in another one. Cain is asking a specific question about who you want to be and where evil arises. Those questions aren't part of its systems or its mechanics, it's part of the world and story that the game is trying to tell. When I think about what RPGs are doing things for the medium, I think of ones like Cain. This is what I want to see more of from the industry in general. I want to see more systems which aren't trying to facilitate a simulation of what a world could look like. Instead, I want a system that explores a specific idea or theme. Those are the games that I think will be the most interesting in the future.